approximately 12 in 100,000 people will choose suicide as their cause of death. But those are the 2016 statistics. Suicide has gone down considerably since then. Mental health is a lot more popular. The study of mental health is a lot more popular. Organizations and companies and media conglomerates have raised awareness about it. So now only 9 in 100,000 people suffer due to suicide. A significant 25% decrease. So if it's not a growing problem and not something that I usually touch upon, why am I mentioning it now? Well, first off, because it's fucking suicide. And secondly, even though larger organizations and government bodies have put an emphasis on it in the last decade, nobody factors in their individual responsibility. Because yes, we are all fighting against suicide in one way or another. Not only can we provoke someone into taking their own lives and cause a cycle of rationalization that leads to suicidal thoughts, but also we ourselves are at risk of putting ourselves or being put in a situation that pretty much forces us to come to terms with the absurdity of our own existence, and that maybe we should just put an end to all of this. The idea for this video came to me after reading the first chapter of Albert Camus' masterpiece of a philosophical essay, The Myth of Sisyphus, where he mentions how society kind of sees suicide as the invisible enemy that has no cure. Because yes, back in 1942, when the essay was written, it didn't really have a sociological, philosophical, maybe philosophical, but sociological, societal cure. But in reality, because suicide is most likely and most often the response to the absurdity that life is imbued with, it's our response, our solution to that absurdity. Whoever causes that stream of consciousness that leads us to thinking that suicide is the only answer, whoever treats us slightly poorly or indifferently, whether it may be a random person on a street, or a family member, or a pretty close or mildly close friend. It doesn't matter, because whoever starts the stream of consciousness that ultimately leads to that rationalization, that poor but seemingly logical rationalization, is logically the person that kind of spurs on the act itself. First off, this video is relevant because even you and me are at risk of suicide. We all have certain buttons that we would rather not talk about that can be pushed or pressed, whatever, pushed, pressed, more or less aggressively, that can lead us down to the pathway that ultimately leads to the rationalization of our own suicide. So yeah, ultimately, we are all at risk of it, both of actually doing it and provoking it for somebody else. First off, because I'm selfish, and you are too, most likely, I'll be talking about how you can prevent your own suicide. Because yes, we can all be at risk of it after one bad day, or even less, really. Both of us have hundreds of problems, thousands of insecurities. And guess what? It's enough for a couple of them to peep their ugly fucking head out, and that itself, on itself, can make us question the absurdity we put up with on a day-to-day basis. As Camus said, the absurd is basically the idea that we have an innate or maybe acquired need to search for meaning in our lives, but life will just refuse to give us one, bare and simple. I saw this pretty cool meme on the one and only Instagram, which basically details perfectly the modern cycle of philosophy. First, you start with hedonism. Then you pass on to nihilism because you realize that your life is meaningless besides the endless chase for pleasure. Then you pass on to stoicism because nihilism is just not so cool and you want to live a life of virtue and whatever. And then you pass to absurdism because you realize, hey, life has no meaning, but that's kind of cool. And then you start all over again. The pinnacle of philosophical discourse, I know. The reason why I'm mentioning this is that we can very easily pass through this cycle 10 times from Monday to Friday. So if on one particular random ass Tuesday afternoon you find yourself filled with suicidal thoughts that you're not good enough, I don't know, whatever, I've caught myself countless of times thinking that I'm not good enough, even though that exact same day I was basically called good enough on 10 different occasions. And my brain was just concentrating on one. That's why life is absurd. So yeah, if on one random goddamn Tuesday afternoon you find yourself thinking that you're not good enough, that maybe you're better off offing yourself, I say this with the most pure amount of love possible. Shut your bitch ass up. Now let's take a look at the everyday, mundane, heroic act of not provoking suicidal thoughts. As we have discussed in depth, you and me, every single member of our respective families, every single bank teller, every single person down the street, every single teacher, every single lawyer, every single doctor has a perfectly rational reason to kill themselves. So obviously, we're all dealing with some pretty horrific things in life. We're not living a life full of sunshine and rainbows with absolutely no reason to end it all. So of course, this can cause some pretty irrational behavior. That rational motive to kill ourselves can lead to irrational behavior. It can lead to indifference. And that indifference can lead to some, yet again, pretty horrid behavior. So, guess what? If you're dealing with something, which is always the case, but if you have become hyper aware of the fact that you are dealing with something nasty and call a friend, phone in a friend, like on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, to basically use them as your therapist, and they respond in a monotone voice, they don't ask questions about the things that you're telling them about, and abruptly hang up because they have better things to do with their life, they're not putting you in a good position. You are not in a good position if that happens to you. One, you're sad, and secondly, your friend has basically ignored you. They do not care about you. Or at least that's what you think. That apathy is going to put a major shining red crosshair on all of your insecurities. And even though nothing has changed from 2 weeks ago when you were all fine and dandy and had a meaning, you had found the meaning of your life, and you were working on your exercise, diet, sleep, whatever, you were biohacking, you were all fine and dandy, basically. You are now aware, conscious of all of the things that are wrong with you, not only with you, but all of the things that you can't control, all of the things inherently wrong with your life. And worst of all, who knows why that friend didn't give two flying fucks about you. If you're in a happy, stable place right now, it might seem absolutely absurd. What I've just said might seem absolutely absurd. How can that minor indifference from a friend, minor reaction from a friend, cause suicide? Are you insane, Elias Bisot? But believe me, when your mindset has been dragged through the mud for 24 hours straight, or even 2 hours straight, if you've just been told the worst news of your life, if you've just realized that you might be inadequate, that you might not have progressed in the last 6 months with whatever you want to progress, you do not know how fragile we can be in those situations. So what can you, a normal everyday person, do to stop the suicide epidemic, which is decreasing but is still present? Well, I have a system called CAE. Care about everything. When a friend calls you purely to talk about themselves, you better listen, and you better listen well. Because you're going to need to ask questions, really thought out questions based on what you've just heard. So, yet again, you better listen. And when you need to ramble about something, when you're basically exploding from the inside, how can you explode from the outside, right? When you're basically exploding because of how upset you are, or because of how reserved you've been for the last couple of hours, weeks, months, years, decades, call in a friend and ramble about whatever makes you feel better. There will be imbeciles that say, oh, you can't phone a friend to speak about yourself and only yourself. Do not fucking listen to them. We all need a suicide prevention buddy. You call them when you need to ramble about whatever you need to ramble about, and they listen, and they call you, and you listen. Ears wide open. Wax free. If you're into sociology, philosophy, psychology, or calisthenics, any of those four, really, subscribe to the YouTube channel. And comment down below how I can improve my videos, because my videos are far from perfect, far from good. Really. So yeah, send this to somebody who you love, and I'll see you later. And I hope stronger than ever.